You know what you're listening to?
Is that a trick question?
It's the I Still Love This Game podcast with your host, Matthew Damian.
He's an idiot. Don't listen to this. He's an idiot.
Hello and welcome to episode 101 of the I Still Love This Game podcast. And before we get into today's topics, and believe me, there are a lot to cover in today's show, but before we get into those topics, I would like to say how much I appreciated the kind words and messages that I received in relation to episode 100. Whether it was congratulating me on making it to 100 episodes, or if it was just, nice sentiments and thoughts in regards to the show in general and the topic in general. That was not an easy show to do. So I appreciate that. I genuinely appreciate that. I know I rip on a lot of the stupid emails and comments that I get, but that was not the case. Moving along, episode 101, and as I said, last night was one of those nights where you could do about 4 or 5 shows off topics based off last night alone. I mean, James Harden went ballistic against New York, and what was even more impressive about it is there was an expectation of him doing this. The stars just lined up for him. He has been playing so well on the offensive end, and is going up against the Knicks in Madison Square Garden. You think about the history associated with that building, and he was able to deliver big time. 61 points. Didn't shoot the three very well, and made 5 out of about 20 attempts. But still, when you look at who he was surrounded with offensively, and to win on the road against anybody is impressive. And that includes the New York Knicks. And it makes you wonder what they are going to do moving forward. Is Chris Paul even movable? I don't think he is. I don't think there's going to be a whole lot of teams that would be willing to take on that contract with his age and also his inability to stay healthy. If he was available to be moved, you got to wonder, would they actually explore that as an option? They won't say that publicly now, but that's something you've got to look into. So we're going to get into that topic of James Harden. We're going to talk about Kobe's 81-point performance all the way back in 2006. And that was one of those days as well where you just remember, like, wow. Yeah, I've got all these memories flooding back to my head. I was a lot younger then, and we all were. It was a long time ago. And I've got some good memories of that. In addition to that, obviously, we're going to be talking about Oladipo. We're going to be talking about LeBron's return, if it's going to happen this season. And we'll hit the mailbag up if we have some time. But obviously, I wanted to lead off with the Oladipo injury. And it's unfortunate, man. It's really unfortunate because the Pacers, leading into this season, I did not know what to expect out of the Pacers. They exceeded all expectations. Oladipo especially exceeded all expectations. Let's apply a little bit of context here. Oladipo was a flat-out rising star for the Orlando Magic in his first couple of seasons. I remember doing an NBA preview before the podcast when it was just, I Still Love This Game, just as an Instagram and Facebook account. I didn't even have the website up. And I was just producing content, and I did every single NBA team and their previews for one particular season. And everything I wrote about the Magic that year was centered around Oladipo. I thought he was a franchise player back then. I thought he was somebody you could build around back then. And then he was traded. Obviously, this was before Durant left. And I thought Durant really skipped town when he didn't need to. When you think about it, who would have thought what Oladipo, absolutely he's a two-way player, but you line him up alongside Westbrook and Durant, and he can just plug any hole that you need. He's not like a Roberson who can only play one end of the court. He's not like Dion Waiters, who was playing for them at that time as well, who could just play on the offensive end. Complete contrast to Roberson, obviously. This guy could play both ends of the court. And then, of course, Durant left. Oladipo played one season with Westbrook. There was no way that Oladipo was going to mesh when it was just Westbrook, because he was asked to be a consistent shooter which is something that Durant would have been for them. And that's never been Oladipo's game. So he didn't mesh, and then he was traded for Paul George. Everyone was saying, well, the Pacers got the better end of that deal, right? Well, not so fast, because they also got Sabonis too. And Sabonis has been playing very, very well for the Pacers too, off the bench. But leading into that season, nobody expected the Pacers to make the playoffs, let alone to really push the LeBron James-led Cavaliers to 7 games. And some people, rightly or wrongly, would say that they played better in that series than what the Cavs did, especially in Game 7. So the point that I wanted to make with all this is Oladipo had found his niche. It wasn't in Orlando. It wasn't in Oklahoma. It was in Indiana. And this season he regressed a little bit from a statistical standpoint, but his leadership was growing and growing and growing. And then, they continued to rise. They were sitting at 4th with expectations. See, last season you could even write off as saying, well, nobody really took them seriously. They're on every team's radar, especially if you're in the Eastern Conference. They were on every team's radar heading into this season. They were not easy beats anymore. And for them to not just duplicate what they did last season, but to actually improve on what they were doing last season, they finished 5th in the conference last season. And now I believe they were 3rd or 4th. One of those two. Either way, if they're 3rd or 4th, they're still improving on 5th. And that to me was really impressive. It showed leadership. It showed signs of improvement and mental toughness to say, hey, we're not satisfied with one season, which you could, if they had struggled, you could classify as a fluke. So that's why it was so disappointing to see him go down in such a terrible injury. And that's why I waited for to do this podcast, because I wanted to see exactly how bad it was. You never know with stuff like this. Paul Pierce, if you had just seen Paul Pierce on the wheelchair in the NBA Finals, you would have thought that may have been a career-ending injury. Of course, he came back out and played. So we had no idea how bad it was. Of course, it came out that it was a ruptured quad, and there's no telling if he'll ever regain that explosiveness in that quad again. It's not as bad as Achilles, historically. Players do come back from this kind of injury. But it's going to be a long road for him. And just like we saw with Derrick Rose, sometimes one injury can lead to becoming injury prone if it's not handled right. And for everything that's said about Kawhi Leonard, I understand 100% when it comes to him in San Antonio, because he was starting to go down that road. Maybe he was becoming injury prone because he was being forced back, or not forced back, but encouraged or pushed along to come back earlier than when his body was ready. And that's a side we haven't heard because, quite frankly, he hasn't gotten into it. So it's impossible to make that judgment of who was right and who was wrong in San Antonio. I will lean towards Kawhi Leonard in that situation, but that's just me. If someone will tell me that San Antonio was right in that situation, I'm not going to argue, because there's no way we're going to be able to determine it because we don't know all the facts. But getting back to Oladipo, I just hope that he's not tempted. Just say if they finish 3rd or 4th in the Eastern Conference and he feels like he's ready to contribute 60% of what he's usually, if he's 60% healthy. I hope he doesn't take the bait with that and it rushes himself back and then does irreparable damage to his legs or any other part of his body because he's just not ready. I hope that he exercises supreme caution and he comes back next season. And this is coming from a fan. I love his game. I love a player that will actually go out there and try to defend the best perimeter player whilst carrying the load offensively for that particular team. I have a lot of respect for him. But I hope he doesn't return this season. And there's another thing that I noticed in last night's game that I really wanted to talk about this, though, when Gordon Hayward broke his leg at the start of last season. And I don't want to say the NBA culture is soft, but I'm going to say that the NBA culture is soft. I don't want to say it, but it is. It's really, really... It's soft, man. It's really soft. And maybe this is something I just have to come to terms with, but whenever you see bad injuries, I look around at the reactions of people in the crowd or the other NBA players, and it's like they've seen a dead body. the way they react. And I get some stuff is gruesome. I get that. Like the Sean Livingston's injury when he was on the Clippers, that was a bad one. And I remember, I think it may have been Tony Allen on the Celtics. That was a pretty horrible one as well. I'm trying to think. There was one player where he broke his ankle and the bone was sticking out through the skin. I can't remember who it was. Those are bad. They're hard to see. They're hard to watch. But players, they go into and fans as well, they go into this period of mourning where it's just complete silence. It almost reminds me of the WWE when somebody's being stretched out of the ring and there's just complete silence. And that's done for a show. And you can't tell me that the NBA doesn't do the same thing. I get the seriousness of it. No, I'm not saying that he's not hurt or anything like that. But to me, it's just a little bit strange to see the same reaction to everything. I don't know. I get that that's just a personality trait. Me playing rugby, me breaking my hands so many times. I couldn't tell you how many times I've broken my hands. I've got rods and plates in my hands. I've had that. And you know what the funny thing was? I played through it. The idiot physio. I broke my finger, right? This is one of the worst injuries I had. Broke my finger, and my finger was hanging pretty much by a thread. If you ever see the x-ray of it, you'll understand what I'm talking about. And I went to the physio and I said, look, I think I've broken my finger. And she goes, oh no, you've just dislocated your knuckle, strapped that finger to the other finger. And I was like, oh, well, I guess so, and I ended up finishing the game. That's just the mentality. That's the difference. There's no wincing. There's no looking like you're about to, run off to the corner to a safe space or anything like that. It's just, I get, maybe it's just a different culture, rugby to basketball. But at the same time, look, let's keep it in perspective. Oladipo is not dead. His season is over. Let's just keep it in a little bit of perspective. It sucks, but we'll see him again. We'll see him on the court again. Even if he never played again, he's still alive. Let's just keep it in perspective. That's all I'm saying. Now, what else happened last night? I started to touch on it, and that's James Harden. I've run out of adjectives for this run, and I'm going to bore you with trying to come up with others. He is a special, special player. And the only kickback you get is from either Kobe fans who are still hanging around or LeBron fans, and they will be saying, oh, well, he gets to the foul line or he travels. Here's a newsflash. NBA superstars get to the foul line. LeBron James got to the foul line. Shaq got to the foul line. My God, the amount of stuff that Shaq got away with, thinking back. I'll never forget the reaction in the 2001 finals where he would just lower his shoulder, pretty much start swinging his elbows at Dikembe Mutombo. Mutombo needed stitches in his tongue. I can't imagine how painful that would be. If you're going to wince at an injury, think about getting stitches on your tongue because of how sensitive your tongue is. And then they were complaining, Shaq complained about it to the ref saying, oh, I wish the defensive player of the year wasn't flopping and all this stuff. The dude was getting hammered every single time. And Shaq was, after that, they just started sending him to the foul line. It blew my mind. But nobody said a word about it back then. Nobody says how LeBron can just lower his shoulder. Guy is in perfect defensive stance, has perfect defensive positioning. He will lower his shoulder, level the guy, and the guy is sent flying, and it will either be a no call, and his fans will say, oh, look, LeBron should be going to the foul line, or they will send him to the foul line. It's insanity. We don't talk about the Golden State Warriors who set so many illegal screens. It's not as if they don't have good shooters already, Klay Thompson, Kevin Durant, and Steph Curry, but they're allowed to set all these illegal moving screens to get them open looks or mismatches. Nobody talks about that. But now they're talking about James Harden. And why is that? Why is it that if I mention anything about LeBron James, I'm instantly labeled a hater or worse? But then if somebody is playing as great as James Harden is playing, they're allowed to try to diminish his accomplishments because they're feeling insecure? Wouldn't that be the definition of hatred? At least more so than what I do? Out of curiosity, please tell me, because I'm confused by this. James Harden, right now, what he's doing is absolutely historic. There's no way to put around it. Look, forget the 61 points. The man also had 15 rebounds. He's big for his size, but his size isn't big, if that makes sense. He's 6'5". He shouldn't be getting 15 to 16 rebounds. That Houston Rockets team is so incredibly small. You got PJ Tucker as pretty much your big man. I know they brought in Fareed, and I'm going to be very interested to see how that goes. Because Kenneth Fareed, I'm not sure if you guys remember, really when the Warriors started to ascend as the Splash Brothers, the very first season that they played, they made the playoffs. They were the 6th seed. They played the Denver Nuggets in the first round, and the Denver Nuggets were the 3 seed. They had won 50 games. Kenneth Fareed was their best player. And then he fell out of the graces in Denver. They didn't want him anymore. They didn't look to trade him. An incredible offensive rebounder. What he is doing is unbelievable in terms of what James Harden is doing, because now, he's going to make Kenneth Fareed look very, very good on the offensive end. Just the same way he made Clint Capella. I talked about Chris Paul being injured. I didn't even mention Capella being injured. I know Eric Gordon is back. Eric Gordon has had a really inconsistent season, especially when you consider what he'd done the last 2 seasons when he was 6th man of the year. What James Harden is doing, we don't see very often. You can think back to Kobe in 2006, Jordan early on, and Wilt Chamberlain. Count on one hand the amount of times we've seen this from players, and James Harden has gone, he's now the 4th. You've still got room for another player if that ever happens. That's how special he has been. And you can talk about all the different eras. Wilt Chamberlain, I've got nothing but respect for Wilt Chamberlain. You talk about Michael Jordan, you talk about Kobe. But 27 and 20 that he has got the Houston Rockets. And Jordan, when Jordan was doing it, the Bulls weren't very good. When Kobe was doing it, the Lakers weren't very good. James Harden has actually done this because 27 and 20, even though that record is better than when Jordan's Bulls were playing well, and also not playing well, but when he was playing for the Bulls, they weren't playing well, excuse me. Or when the Lakers were playing, they weren't playing well either. James Harden at 27 and 20, that's being generous because they got off to such a bad start. And once James Harden took it over, they've actually been playing much better than a 27 and 20 record would indicate. That's why it's so damn impressive. And I don't know why fans or the media are reluctant to just say he's by far the best player in the league. You've still got people saying LeBron's the best player in the league. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? Stop it. He is not. This is insane. James Harden is by far the best player in the league, and it's not even close. And he is, I talked about the leadership of Oladipo. We are seeing incredible leadership from James Harden. And these are the kind of tears that you just don't see too often. And if they are able to surround him with consistent defensive players outside of PJ Tucker, then the sky's the limit for him because he's not that old. I leading into this season, I was thinking that maybe Westbrook was ready to take a leap and, go from being a statistics guy to being a leadership guy. And yes, maybe he's done that too, by the way. His statistics aren't very good, especially shooting. But he's taken a backseat to Paul George in terms of scoring the basketball, and the Thunder are playing better. But what we're seeing with James Harden is maybe he's taken a huge leap, and it's all snuck up on us because nobody thought that he could play better than what he did last year. Because he didn't just knock on the door to win the MVP. He had to kick that door down. He was runner-up twice. And you can make a really good argument that he should have won both times. Although I will stick with Westbrook and his triple-double year. James Harden, 95% of the time, if he didn't run up against that kind of an MVP, that kind of an incredible season, he would have won the MVP. He was playing incredible. And that was before Chris Paul got there. Eric Gordon was there, though. So I am just blown away at the criticism. But I don't really sweat it too much. But when I look at it, I just think, man, these are the same people that will tell you to, swallow up everything that LeBron James does on the basketball court. But yet when you've got someone like James Harden who's genuinely being historic, they look for the smallest of critiques, and it's not even a consistent critique, because as I said, Jordan got to the foul line a lot. Shaq got to the foul line a lot. LeBron got to the foul line a lot. Great players get to the foul line. Does he bend the rules? Yeah, of course he does. Did Patrick Ewing? Of course he did. Did Karl Malone? Of course he did. If we're going to whinge about him traveling, let's talk about all the pivot feet that get picked up when people it's not just him. It's just insane. It's just absolutely insane. I'm going to get off this topic because I'm going to ramble on for too long. But at this point, he is by far and away the best player in basketball. And it's not even close. 61 points, as I mentioned before, though. And it's funny because in this past week was the anniversary of Kobe going for 81 points. And, of course, people compared the two games. I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to talk about Kobe's 81-point game. And I'd like to add a bit of a backstory to this. I was not a huge Kobe Bryant fan heading into the 2006 season. But I said to... I can't remember his name. Someone I went to school with. I said to him, heading into the season, the Kobe's about to take a huge jump. He's going to be a special player. And he said, "Oh no, Kobe's too selfish," because that was the criticism at that time. Because prior to Shaq leaving, Kobe really didn't get criticized for being quote unquote selfish. It was Tracy McGrady or it was Allen Iverson who would get that. And Kobe because he had good shooting percentages and good assist numbers, and they were winning a lot, they didn't really give that to him. But after the 2004 finals, and then of course Shaq leaving, the perception changed, and Kobe was suddenly a selfish guy. Forget that now he is surrounded with, or at least heading into the season, he was surrounded with Chris Mim and Kwame Brown and Smoosh Parker in their starting lineup. All of that was irrelevant. And we started to see some incredible scoring performances from Kobe. 35 points per game is no joke. And outside of Wilt Chamberlain, only Jordan had averaged higher than that. Of course, with 37 points per game. James Harden could blow that out of the water, by the way, if he continues playing the way that he is right now. And we had seen some incredible scoring performances. We saw the 62 points in 3 quarters against the Mavs. But that wasn't new because we had seen Kobe do stuff like that when Shaq was on the team. I remember Shaq got suspended for one game. I think this was actually against Dallas as well. And Kobe put up 56 points in 3 quarters. So the 62 points against the Mavs, we were kind of getting used to these offensive explosions from Kobe. We also saw him put 42 points up in the half in his last game against Jordan. 55 overall. I mean, who would ever forget that? All those threes that he was just stepping. People talk about Steph Curry and what Steph Curry has done in terms of just pulling up from deep. Kobe was stepping over half court and just launching bombs. And it wasn't even coming close to hitting the rim. It's like, if you've ever played the game, you'll understand this. Sometimes you get a swish or whatever, and it doesn't really feel like it. It feels like it's soft. But Kobe was getting so much arc, the net was barely moving. It was incredible. It was absolutely one of the games you have to watch if you haven't seen, if you're a new NBA fan. Look it up. It was 2003, the Wizards at the Lakers. Kobe versus Jordan for the very last time. But the point I was making is we'd seen those offensive explosions before. But the one against Dallas really started to open our eyes as to how good he was. And if you read some of the quotes after the game, I think it was Brian Shaw that was upset with him because he was saying, hey, you have an opportunity to get 70 points, which is rare. And he's right, it is rare. Guess how many times Jordan has scored 70 points? 0. Guess how many times Shaq has done it? 0. Kobe had an opportunity for it, and he said, no, it's fine. I'll do it another day. The balls on this guy, man. The balls. I'll do it another time. I'm bored now. I'm tired. I'll do it tomorrow. Wow. And sure as shit, he did, though. He absolutely did. And I was watching the game, and we had the Raptors broadcast. For whatever reason, we had the Raptors broadcast in Australia. I don't know why. International TV rights. It's a funny game sometimes, right? And I'll never forget how smug the Raptors broadcasters were at halftime. Because I think Kobe had around 30 points. Don't quote me on that. But he had around 30 points, which is still, like, you think, well, he finished with 81, so 30 is not that much. It actually is. 30 is a hell of a performance in a half. But the Raptors broadcasters were saying, oh, well, you know, Kobe can score as much as he wants, but if he doesn't get his teammates involved, it doesn't matter. Wow. Wow. Because you think about that, he ended up scoring 81. I guess he can score as much as he wants, right? Literally. 81 points. 81. Can you believe that? And this is why I think it was the greatest scoring performance of all time. Not the greatest game of all time, but the greatest scoring performance of all time. Because when Wilt dropped 100, I'm not going to go into this conspiracy theory nonsense, but there are quotes from his teammates saying towards the end of the game, the Knicks were trying to dribble out the clock, so they were intentionally fouling. The Wilt's team, the Sixers, they wanted Wilt to get the record, obviously. The Knicks did not want him to get the record. So the Knicks were intentionally trying to dribble out the clock. So his teammates were actually fouling the Knicks players to ensure that he would get enough possessions. They already had the lead. They had the game completely in hand. So I don't know how much he would have actually finished up with had he just had the Kobe mentality. Not the Mamba mentality. The Kobe mentality of, you know what, I'll do it again. It's fine. It's not a big deal. So that's why I think what Kobe did was more impressive. That being said, 100 points is no joke. That is absolutely insane when you think about it. So, but I'm going to stick to what I said. The 81 points is the greatest offensive game I've ever seen in my life. But it's not the greatest game I've ever seen. I think Jordan's 63 points against Boston, I think that's the most impressive thing I've ever seen from an individual standpoint. And I know they lost. So don't, you know, I mean, by all means, if you want to, you can email me and say, oh, they lost those. How good is that? I'll tell you why it's so good. He played 20 games that year. He was coming off a broken foot. So he's essentially still a rookie. Only his second season, but essentially still a rookie. And he's going up against a team with 5 Hall of Famers. 5 of them. Not 1, not 2, not 3, not 4, but 5 of them. In addition to that, the 86 Celtics are considered by many, not everybody, and not the majority, but by many, to be the greatest team of all time. But they are universally regarded as maybe the best team at home in NBA history. They only lost 1 game at home. 1 game at home. They only lost 1 game at home. Jordan, essentially as a rookie, scores 63 points on them. And if you watch this game, you know, Bill Walton has a hell of a quote about this. Bill Walton said, and he should know, he was one of the Hall of Famers that went up against Jordan in this game. He was talking about how a lot of quote-unquote wannabes saw Jordan's highlights and the heroics that he, the incredible shots that he would make, and they tried to emulate that. What they didn't take into account that Jordan was really playing off his teammates, and those incredible shots were late in the shot clock, where he had to put something up, he had to create something. Take that into account. So it wasn't like a situation where he was just trying to run up the score, and he made that game competitive. Once again, this isn't Devin Booker putting up 70 points, and the game was never in doubt. This was actually a situation where Jordan's play completely made that game competitive. And here's a side note in all of this. The Bulls would have won. They should have won. Down by 2 at the end of regulation. Jordan's bringing the ball up. He pulls up from 3. He gets fouled by Kevin McHale behind the 3-point line. Back then, they did not award, if you're fouled shooting a 3, they did not award you 3 foul shots. Jordan made the first 2. There's no way you can tell me that he would not have made the 3rd. Then they would have won that. The series would have been tied, and that's as good as the Bulls would have gotten up against that Celtics team. But regardless, that's why I could instantly discount any criticism, of him not winning that ball game. Absolutely. And it's just funny to me that the people will blame J.R. Smith for LeBron not being able to get over the line in Game 1 of the NBA Finals. But yet they'll turn around and say, well, Jordan didn't win against the Celtics. To me, LeBron had a hell of a lot more help than what Jordan did. And he was going up against a better team. Because when I said there's 5 Hall of Famers on that Celtics team, there's Warriors, you can make an argument that they will have 4 Hall of Famers. However, if you take the Hall of Famers off the Celtics, Dennis Johnson, he already won a championship with Seattle. Bill Walton already won a championship in Portland. If you took Robert Parrish off this team, if you took Kevin McHale or Larry Bird off that team, all of them would still be in the Hall of Fame. Draymond Green is going to go into the Hall of Fame, and I don't begrudge him for this, but he's going to go into the Hall of Fame on resume alone. If he was not on Golden State, he would not be going to that. He would not be a Hall of Famer. And the same, you could say, quite honestly, for Klay Thompson too. So that's why I put the Celtics way ahead in terms of competition as opposed to the Bulls. But no one can legitimately say that LeBron had less help than what Jordan had in 1986. So that's the greatest offensive game I've ever seen. Or the greatest game, The greatest pure scoring standpoint, at least in the regular season, it's Kobe at 81 points. Now, speaking of the Celtics and the Warriors, of course, very different version of the Celtics, but it's cool. We're going to run with that segue. We've got a showdown coming up on Saturday. It'll be Sunday in the back home in Australia, but Saturday in the United States, we finally get to see the Celtics versus the Warriors this season, and I cannot wait. I've been waiting for this. This is a matchup that I'm very excited about. And this might be the premier matchup. This might be the game that gets the Celtics really back on track. Because, if they're waiting for a challenge, if they're bored, if their egos are a little bit messed up, if they're not humble enough right now based off their success last year, if they need something to get them back on track in terms of concentrating and their eyes back on the ultimate goal, which is the championship, which they are capable of winning, it's this Golden State team. Golden State, people are calling the greatest team of all time again. I don't know how many times we have to hear that because DeMarcus Cousins hasn't destroyed this team yet. So congratulations to them for not allowing themselves to be imploded just yet. But the Celtics, they're going to present a pretty good challenge to them. And if Kyrie Irving is healthy, he didn't play last night or last game against the Cavs. If Kyrie Irving is healthy, this is a hell of a game. And I'm looking forward to it a lot. Because they will have, at least from an athletic standpoint, a mismatch with DeMarcus Cousins versus either Aaron Baines or Al Horford. Both guys are undersized. What are the Warriors going to do in that situation? Are they going to try to appease DeMarcus Cousins and get him looks in the post? Who is that going to come at the expense of? Who are those shots? Is it going to come at the expense of everybody? Or is there one player that's going to be the odd man out? And this might be the worst case scenario for the Warriors. As I said in the last, or not the last episode, but the last one prior to episode 100, so 99. That's a very convoluted way of saying 99. What happens if he starts to get going? Or if he feels comfortable and he wants more shots, more opportunities? How are the Warriors going to appease him? And I got a bit of a pushback with that. People saying that, they'll be fine. Klay Thompson he hasn't dropped off at all when they added Kevin Durant. No, that's true. But Kevin Durant really took Harrison Barnes and Sean Livingston's shots. Sean Livingston started to decline. But now you add another piece to this. And then whose production goes down. And as much as I like Klay Thompson, if I have a choice between Steph Curry shooting or Kevin Durant shooting or Klay Thompson shooting, Klay Thompson is number 3 out of that list. So how is this team going to be able to hold it together? They could barely hold it together when Draymond Green wants to take a bad shot or feels like scoring. And then, it all turns to shit in that situation. So what happens when DeMarcus Cousins starts to want more? This has the potential to be an implosion situation for the Warriors. It also has the potential to put them legitimately back into the greatest team of all time conversation. So it'll be interesting to see which direction it does go in. But that's just one facet to watch. Look, when I said this is a matchup of the season, though, it's only the matchup of the season if Kyrie Irving is playing. If Kyrie Irving is not playing, watch the Pro Bowl. Is that on Saturday? It might be on Sunday. I'm not too sure. And the final topic that I wanted to talk about is LeBron and when can we expect him returning? Look, when he was injured, I immediately smelt a rat. I didn't think he was hurt. And I stand by that. I still don't think he was hurt. I thought that was a play to try to garner MVP attention. Now, what happened was James Harden just exploded, and nobody's talking about anybody outside of maybe Giannis as having an MVP caliber season outside of James Harden. And that includes LeBron James. So the angle I think they were looking to go with was, okay, I think they were 4th in the West. Maybe they were 5th. I can't remember. They had a winning record. And then LeBron gets injured. They fall off the tracks. LeBron comes back in, saves the day. They finish up in the playoffs with a 5th or 6th seed. And they just compare the record with him as opposed to the record without him. And then people will talk about how the Cavs were with him as opposed to without him, and how this is a historical thing because we've seen this with Miami as well. And that's the angle they were going to run with, because his production wasn't going to overtake anyone like Giannis or Kawhi Leonard or even Anthony Davis, and definitely not James Harden. But now James Harden has played so well that that's out of the equation. And they've stumbled. And I said they had to be very careful with playing like this because they could easily fall out of the playoff picture. And they have. They are currently 9th in the Western Conference without LeBron. So that's the predicament they are in now. It is obvious, even with LeBron, that they are not going anywhere this season. They may get out of the first round, but if they get to the NBA Finals, and wow, I will be shocked, and it may be, LeBron's greatest accomplishment if that happens. However, I truly don't think that's going to happen. So what's the incentive for LeBron to come back then? And you might say, well, hold on a second, he may just be injured, that's why they're holding him out. I don't buy that. Him saying audibly, I heard it pop. Yeah, well, okay, congratulations, you heard it pop, right? But then you walked off the court. Anybody who's done a groin knows how incredibly difficult it is to, even if it's just a strain and it's not a tear, it pops when it's teared, not when it's sprained. Then we got the MRI results saying that there was nothing there, but they were just going to take their time with it. They weren't going to rush him back because they had that buffer. Now, it's looking like they don't have that buffer and they're still not rushing him back. Why? Do they know that this season's a lost season? We kind of knew that anyway. I remember saying when he went to LA that this was not for basketball reasons, based off what's going to happen in LA and the talent they had. They weren't going to accomplish anything based off their talent and the conference they were going to be playing in. So we kind of knew that already. So are they basically giving him the rest of the year off so you can develop the younger guys maybe? But unless if they get a big name in a trade, which is another topic altogether, by the way. We've got some time. Maybe we'll get time to talk about it now. But unless if they get some players coming in now, they're looking at it from the standpoint, well, why should we bring LeBron back? So that's just something that I don't think he was ever injured. I think that this was a ploy to win the MVP. It didn't work, and now they're going to plan B, which is, well, we're not going to make the playoffs anyway, so let's rest LeBron for the rest of the season. It would suck if you bought tickets. It really would. And if it comes out that he wasn't hurt and he's just sitting out games, and wow, just wow. But I'm not surprised. He's done this before. And I'm kind of finishing up this topic early because I wanted to talk about them potentially trading for Conley or Davis. If you can get Anthony Davis, I get it. Go for him, because you don't want a situation. Because remember Paul George? And they were like, why should we trade for him if he's just going to come here? And then he was traded to Oklahoma. He ended up loving Oklahoma, and he decided to stay there. What happens if Anthony Davis goes to Boston instead? If he goes to Boston, maybe he loves it there. He doesn't go to LA. It's possible, right? It just happened. So of course it's possible. It just happened with Paul George. So I would, if I had the opportunity, I would not hesitate. Especially if you're talking about guys like Ingram, like Kuzma, as well as Kuzma's playing. If you get a chance for Anthony Davis, you go after Anthony Davis. It's much easier to find Kuzmas in this league than it is to find an Anthony Davis. Who else is there? Lonzo Ball, please take him. By the way, what a screw-up that was, drafting Lonzo Ball. I was thinking about that the other day. And people have kind of forgotten about D'Angelo Russell. But he should be an all-star this season. And the fact that they went with Lonzo Ball, forget the fact that they passed on someone like Tatum, right? Because you could have not just Tatum, but they got rid of Russell in order to give space for Ball to develop. So you could have Russell and Tatum. And then if you had LeBron, then you'd have Ingram as well. And of course they got rid of Randall. So there's a lot of talent that they let walk through that door for virtually nothing. For LeBron and Lonzo Ball. So that's interesting to me. The other names that have come up is Pau Gasol and Mike Conley. I don't think Marc Gasol will go to the Lakers, but I could see them getting desperate and making a trade for Mike Conley. But if they do that, that tells you that they have absolutely no confidence in signing a player in free agency, a big free agent. Because he's going to chew up so much of your cap room that at most you can get one guy. They have the cap space to go after two. So if they have very little confidence in being able to get Durant or Leonard or Davis or whoever they feel like they get, Kyrie Irving, then you'll see that trade go down. If they feel confident that they can bring other stars out, but I can't see any of them going out there with the exception of maybe Kyrie Irving. That's the only guy I could see going out there right now. And if someone said that to me at the start of the season, I would laugh in their face because I thought it was so ridiculous. But it just makes perfect sense. Just makes perfect sense. Anyway, guys, it's good back talking just about basketball, and I hope you enjoyed the show. 45 minutes, baby. We're back to the long rants of I still love this game. Continue to send through your emails. Continue to send through your messages, your comments, whatever they are. If they're good, I will use them as questions. If they're not, well, sorry, try again. Once again, if you are listening to us as a podcast, keep in mind we have started a brand new show called Garbage Time, which is typically an exclusive on either YouTube or Facebook. However, if basketball topics are covered, then I'll put it on the podcast as well, so you'll be able to get it via podcast. But guys, thanks for listening. Hope you have a great weekend. If you're back in Australia, please stay out of the heat. If you're in the United States, please find heat and warmth wherever you can, because there's not a whole lot of it going around right now. But yes, big game this weekend. Hope you enjoy it, and I hope you enjoyed the show.